first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. For the consent items, I'll read out the title associated with the recommended motions printed on the agenda. Members of General Committee may ask that an item be held to discuss the matter further. If an item is not held, the motion is deemed to be approved on consent. No further discussion of the item will take place at General Committee, and the item will go forward to tonight's City Council meeting for consideration. 5.1, report of the Community Safety Committee dated June 21st, 2023 is to be received. I'll ask Councilor Morales, can you provide a summary of the meeting, please?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. At the meeting, which was, I'm just getting the date here, June 21st, 2023, everybody on the committee was in attendance, and we talked about the School Guard Crossing Program. As you know, Mayor Nuttall, that has been something that during your terms at council, during some of the previous terms after 2014, it's coming up consistently. So we move forward with a pilot project about specific locations, and we also reminded the citizens about the importance of also engaging with the school boards as well. And then we also did investigation as to no parking on City View Circle and the installation of a controlled crosswalk in Ward 8 at Marshall Street.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll move on to the motions from the committee. CSC1 Adult School Crossing Guard Program. That's approved. CSC2 Investigation for No Parking Anytime, City View Circle, Ward 6. That's approved. CSC3 Request for a review of the installation of a controlled crosswalk on Baldwin Lane at Marshall Street, Ward 8. That's approved. We'll move on to 5.2, report of the Infrastructure and Community Investment Committee dated June 22nd, 2023. The report of the Community Safety Committee dated June 21st, 2023 is to be received. I'll now call upon Councillor Hamilton. Can you provide a summary of the meeting?
Sure, thank you, and through you, Mayor Nuttall. The meeting of the Infrastructure Committee Investment took place on June 22nd. Everybody was present. I think probably the key item on that was a presentation concerning the Blue Blocks transition and solid waste collection contract, which will be effective May 1st, 2024. Also on there was the discussion around the landfill bike diversion pilot program, which was recommended to be referred to the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee. And finally, there was discussion around Maple Leaf Forever, recognizing the importance of the native maple tree.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. We'll move on to ICIC 1, the Memorandum Blue Box Transition and New Waste Collection Contract details. All those in favor? Carries. ICIC 2, the Landfill Bike Diversion Pilot Program referral. All those in favor?
We're holding.
Sorry, I'm out of practice, clearly. So that's not held, or is that held by Councillor Kungl?
Held, the landfill bike diversion pilot program,
Thank
please.
you. The Firebird Community Cycle, ICIC 3. Sorry, it's not held, it's approved on consent. ICIC 4, creating a grant to support community-based cycling groups to advance the city's cycling objectives.
Hold, please.
That's held by Councillor Kungl. Maple Leafs Forever, ICIC 5.
Hold, please.
That's held by Councillor Corser. 5.3, report of the Affordability Committee dated June 22nd, 2023. The report is to be received. Councillor Nixon, can you please provide a summary of the meeting?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Nuttall. The Affordability Committee held their last meeting on August 16th. It was chaired by myself. The full committee was in attendance, as well as Councillor Riedma and Councillor Corser. In addition, we had 9 staff present. We met primarily for the purpose of zoning bylaw amendment at 159 Huronia Road in Ward 8. James Hunter of IPS gave a brief talk on the review of their application, and then Dana Sotheby, our planner, provided an update concerning the review, the status of the application. We had three verbal comments from the public in attendance, and the meeting adjourned at 6:58 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. I don't see any motions coming out of that. So we'll move on to staff reports. Staff report CAM 001-23. This is the Bear Creek Wetland Marta Crescent flooding issue, Ward 6.
Hold, please.
That's held by Councillor Negussi. DEV 032-23, the municipal street naming for streets and industrial plan of subdivision 80 Big Bay Point Road and 315 Bayview Drive. It's approved on consent. DEV 034-23, zoning bylaw amendment for 667, 669, 673, and 675 Yonge Street in Ward 9.
Hold.
It's held by Councillor Morales. DEV 037-23, the zoning bylaw amendment for 518 to 524 Tiffin Street, Pioneer Family Pools, Barrie Inc., Ward 5. It's approved on consent. DEV 038-23, rates of speed bylaw update. It's approved on consent. DEV 041-23, Federal Housing Accelerator Fund update.
Hold. Hold.
It's held by Councillor Morales. FAC 004-23, Facilities Planning and Development 2023 Capital Funding. It's approved on consent. FIN 016-23, 115 Bayfield, reimbursement of cash in lieu charge. It's approved on consent. IGM 001-23, archaeological investigation, Hewitt Secondary Plan Area, Ward 10. That is approved on consent. LCS 010-23, confidential personal information matter, appointments and terms of reference updates to various committees and boards. Held by Deputy Mayor Thompson. Confidential personal information matter just jumped the wrong one there. Textile collection program agreement extensions. That's approved as well. The items for discussion, invitation to present to council, Art and Water Group from Councillor Nixon. It's approved on consent. The confidential potential disposition of land matter, city properties, sponsored by Councillors Nixon and Harris. That's approved on consent. We'll now jump back to the first items that were held, which I believe, if I'm going by memory, was Councillor Kungl. ICIC 2 landfill bike diversion program. Councillor Kungl, would you put the item on the floor, or?
Yeah, I'll put the item on the floor as presented. And to speak to that, just looking for maybe staff input and/or then I'll redirect to maybe Councillor Hamilton as chair of the Infrastructure Committee. So noting that that did come from Active Transportation, our next meeting is Thursday, September 7th at 5:30 p.m. We move up a week, starting in the fall, and that will be before council resumes to clarify further. But as it comes back, then asking for clarification about what further information is needed to direct a pilot program to then move into the potential for a permanent process by which we are diverting bicycles that have been dropped off at the landfill. Currently, they are set aside, and Firebird, as a not-for-profit, is picking them up. So I know that the motion is redirecting it back to the committee, but I'm not seeing context in the minutes, and we'd like to know how best do we support moving this forward with those committee members. So I can start with Councillor Hamilton, if there was any context not captured in the minutes about what's needed at the committee, or I'll let you redirect. Councillor Rietma, it looks like you might have a particular point.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I recall the discussion correctly, and I think I do, there was a question raised about the giving this program to Firebird without having sort of competing or knowing what else was out in the market. And there's a caution around the committee about sole source, if you will, that kind of thing. And that's why the committee suggested, I mean, I think the committee thinks it's a great idea, but there's a level of discomfort about the sole sourcing part of it. So I think the ATS can do some work on that and come back.
Thank you, Councillor Rietma, for the clarification. I guess I would almost look to staff then to say, is that in the best interest to parachute it back to committee members, because I think we'll need staff input anyways, or should we start with staff around asking a bit about how this came about, if they know to date, if anyone else is there, and then we can pull that information to the committee in advance of having a discussion, because I know at least the conversation would like to continue. So perhaps I'll take this offline to staff then, if that's the full context of really looking at who's benefiting from the diversion, which follows our circular economy framework, but more so than who's benefiting and how those monies are spent, and if it should be an open call for interest is what I'm hearing. Okay. So unless there's any other context, I think I have what I need.
Thank you, Councillor Congo. I would also echo, I don't think it should necessarily come from a committee recommending who to use. If there's an action and an outcome that we're looking at, I think that may be where it needs to be guided in the future. And so I wasn't at the committee, but did hear about it afterwards. I think that overall, if between the committee and maybe having somebody from staff there that can provide a little bit of information on how we do procurement or we do granting, depending on what system they use to judge what's the right way to go. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on the item? Seeing none, all those in favor? It carries. We're now going to go on to ICIC 4, which is creating a grant to support community-based cycling groups to advance the city's cycling objectives. Councillor Kunkel.
Yes, thank you. So I'll table the motion as presented. Now, this was something that was seemed to fall in line with kind of staff objectives. And I know we do the $300,000 sport grant. So again, for clarity, as we go back to active transportation, it was raised as an opportunity to align to strategy, to support that committee being able to kind of know how to move this forward. I guess I'll direct the question to staff, and perhaps it would be Ms. Banfield, as I believe then it fell through Mr. Graytrix, around kind of our trying to achieve Barrie as a cycle-friendly community and some of the other initiatives. Is this something that fits within a work plan, and or is there any information you can share around how this might align to some of the objectives in that department before our next Active Transportation Committee meeting on September the 7th? Oh, sorry, redirect to Dawn.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungle. The Recreation and Sport Grant does provide an opportunity, and in this, for this particular type of project, actually 3 applications that we're supporting, cycling initiatives within the community were supported through that grant. So to establish a different grant specific to this seems counterintuitive with relatively scarce financial resources of the corporation, and I would note that Firebird was successful as a grant applicant most recently in the sport and recreation, the Recreation and Sport Grant.
Thank you for that, and noted. And I think the framing of this was if it was the committee and/or if it was a competition between a staff or city initiative that was tied, I think, outside of maybe the $300,000. So I'll loop back with staff tied to kind of presenting this idea forward that the committee supported. And then we can look at if it's just maybe an endorsement that ongoing, maybe there's some contingent of that grant that continues to be prioritized or supporting cycle infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kungle. Are there any other comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? It carries. We'll now move on to ICIC 5, Maple Leafs Forever. Councillor Corser.
Okay, so I'd like to put the item on the table as presented, and it's absolutely a simple housekeeping thing. I hate to be the spelling and grammar police, but it's Maple Leafs Forever, spelt as in maybe the hockey team, and I was wondering if we could just change the name of the motion to Maple Trees Forever, because it's a misspelling. Who would I speak to about that? Who would I
Member
direct that
Clerk?
to? Mayor. Through you.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser. I believe it's more of an administration. We could probably, maybe if you want to be more formal, you can do it as an amendment, or actually that's probably best if we do it that way, just to be clear.
Okay, thank you. I just caught that the last second, so I wasn't sure how to move forward with it. Thank you. So do I make that an
So,
amendment?
Councilor Corso, would you like to move an amendment to remove the word leaves and add in the word trees?
Yeah.
Perfect. So that amendment's on the floor. Any comments or questions with regards to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor? It carries. On the main motion, are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? It carries. We'll now move on to CAM 001-23, Bear Creek Wetland, with Councilor Negussi.
Thank you, Mayor Nadal. I'm going to put item on the floor. I have amendment on this motion that's focused on staff direction, and I'm going to read it as follow. Proposed amendment by myself, CAM 001-23, Berry Creek Waterland, Martha Crescent flooding issue, by adding the following paragraph C, that staff incorporate asset management report back to the Infrastructure Community Investment Committee on effectiveness of the project by September 2024.
Thank you, Councilor Negussi. I know that you were working on this today with Councilor Ritma, and thank you for bringing this forward. Any questions and comments with regards to the amendment to the main motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carries. Any comments or questions on the main motion as amended? Seeing none, I'm just going to, first of all, I just want to ask a couple questions, and then I want to speak to this motion a little bit. Bala, there was a call and an email received today with regards to the abutting property owner ensuring that any of the water that was not moved onto their land directly. Could you comment on that? And just, I want to make sure that everyone's working together and we're not going to see just the displacement of water, but an actual a flow of water out of here.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall, for the question. Yeah, we are working with the landowner just to the north, and in implementing the solution, we'll make sure that we address any concerns they have. The solution as proposed will require access to their property, and we'll work with them to make sure that we're able to implement the solution without any impact to their lands, and make sure that there is no adverse impacts.
Thank you so much for the answer. And on the main motion, I think there's a couple things that we need to stop and take note of here. First of all, this is going to cost a lot of money to fix, in the millions of dollars to fix. And for those who are at home who don't know what's happening here, it's that there's, I guess if framed one way, there's wetland creep into backyards of homes. And if framed the other way, there was homes built on a wetland. And we need to take note of this. This is a planning issue from a long time ago, something I probably voted on back in the day, that is costing a lot of money to the city of Barrie, and has caused a lot of, I think, pain to the residents who are around it. So when we're working through different planning matters, we need to make sure that we get these right, because you're talking about less than 20 homes, Councilor Negussi?
Yes.
15 homes, 12 homes. And The cost to fix this is going to be in the millions of dollars. So I thought it was important to note that we all remember that, keep that in the back of our minds as different proposals come forward. You know, we put the density where the density belongs, and we also need to be wary of allowing development in places where it doesn't look like it's going to have a long-lasting plan, because we can't go back to the developers in the area on this. We have no shot there. It's the city of Barrie and its taxpayers are eating a massive bill here based on a planning decision from a couple of decades ago. With Councillor Morales.
Sir Mayor Nuttall, one very quick question based on the comments that you said. I hadn't been thinking about this before. Is there any recourse with the conservation authorities? Just because a lot of approvals that have to do with sensitive areas, either of the, and I'm not being presumptive, I'm just wondering if that's off the table or if that's something to be looked at.
CEO Prowse.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Through you to Councillor Morales. I think staff are continuing to look at that. On first pass, we don't think so, Councillor Morales, but we haven't given up the discussion.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Councillor Morales. With that, the only other item I would say on this is, Councillor Negussi, you've brought this for quite a number of times to try to get some action on it. I think this will result in action. To the residents in the area, it doesn't result in action today. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. We need to make sure that we do any work in this area around the wetland, we do it correctly, and that we don't either create further damage to the properties there or even as importantly to the ecosystem as a whole. With that said, all those in favor? And it's approved.
Separate report.
Separate report is being requested by Councillor Morales. Councillor Morales, DEV 034-23. If you could put that on the floor. Before you do, I apologize. I'm struggling with some allergies today, so bear with me as we get through the meeting here.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll put the report as printed on the floor. And now I have an amendment. So the amendment is as follows. Everybody should have a digital and paper copy in front of them. Please let me or the clerk's staff know if you don't. Proposed amendment is DEV 034-23- zoning bylaw amendment 667, 669, 673, and 675 Yonge Street, Ward 9, by adding a section G to paragraph 2 as follows. That notwithstanding the provisions set out in section 5.4.3.5 in bylaw 2009-141, a minimum of 50% of the ground floor building frontages abutting public streets will consist of commercial or institutional uses. And also by adding a new paragraph 5 as follows, that at the time of site plan, the applicant is encouraged to consider the following: creative garbage collection solutions, EV parking stations, small revision on that, EV parking rough-ins, and the use of creeping thyme and clover grass. And I can speak to that, Mayor Nuttall.
Councillor Morales.
I'll speak just to the amendment for now. I'll keep my comments to the general application. So I met with the applicant last week, and one of the things we noticed is we want mixed use in these buildings on Yonge Street on our corridors. So specifically Montgomery Drive, which is perpendicular road off Yonge Street, that's the kind of place where a little cafe, I believe one of the applicants said, be a great place for potentially a bubble tea place. That's a place where you want patios, you want that kind of third place for people to gather. So just by tweaking this, it just ensures that the Montgomery side is going to be commercial, because as approved right now in the staff report that everybody got, right now that's planned for 2 residential units. So that's really it. In simple language, we're just ensuring that 2 residential units don't go there, they could go somewhere else, and instead we got commercial. And then the other language, obviously changes that the province has made has prevented us from being over prescriptive with landscape design materials, but obviously things that are important to me for this development, and I think for other things of this density, is the EV rough-ins, which the applicant has committed to doing anyways. It's just good business. and this one's interesting. The use of creeping thyme and clovergrass. I know there's some councillors, obviously, who are advocates of sustainable green space, and normal grass is very water demanding. This is very low maintenance, doesn't grow as fast, isn't as ugly for weeds. So this is really the future for all those little landscape strips that you see in buildings. Not only that, but if we allow regular grass, that's just an added expense to either the condo corporation or the renters. So it's another added cost to either or, and inevitably, they're not going to cut the lawn as much as they should. So someone's going to call bylaw, and someone has to go out there and do a work order. I much rather those staff, our bylaw staff, be enforcing other matters that are important to the city instead of essentially policing weeds in new developments. And this is a very small way to prevent that. And finally, the creative garbage solutions. This is going to be handled at site plan with staff, but it just gives the option, and this is already discussion, to potentially include below ground garbage enclosures such as Moloch bins, but not limited to Moloch bins, which just allow better garbage maintenance. I'm sure we've all visited a condo or an apartment where the garbage room maybe could have had a little bit better design, or it's broken, or raccoons get in. So these are very small things, and provincial changes prevent us from saying shall. So I'm just putting this here, even though the applicant has expressed desire to explore the EV stuff as well as the grass options.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Kungl.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Through you to Councillor Morales. Happy to see the promotion, of course, of things from a water reduction use and or native species. Listing 2 out, although it's not prescriptive, if it starts to become something that gets replicated, might be nice to consider more broader language around native species and or water tolerant ground coverage. The piece that I did have a question, and I'll start with you, but then I can move to staff. So knowing that even this evening we're talking about the transition to the Blue Box program and different recycling infrastructure, I'm not sure, and maybe it's first better to staff, if there will be some type of requirement for different building structures, should they want city services, to be required to be less creative if they actually want to be compliant with the future transition of certain size boxes. So when we talk about creative garbaging collection solutions, just wondering about how that's interpreted versed on, will there be anything that you're aware of that will be a bit more prescriptive with the Blue Box recycling program, knowing that that's an 8-year transition period out?
If I may, Mayor Nuttall, through you. So to answer your question, Councillor Kungl, so this wording will not be limiting in any manner to incoming revisions to provincial policies in regards to that. The wording creative was specifically a staff word. I wanted to go a little bit more specific, but creative, and I agree with staff, creative is more appropriate because I was going to be a little bit more sole-sourced, if you will. And the second one, it actually achieves exactly the great question you had, which is keep it generic because changes might come in. This development is interesting. It has the old official plan, but it might have the new zoning, but it might have the old zoning. So the reason I got a little bit into the weeds, pun intended, with some of these things is I wanted to put them on the record, and also this applicant has been extremely cooperative. This is not something where I've had to say, hey, you should do this. This is where they've said, we want to do this. The first one about the commercial, they were the ones that had that vision for that kind of third place, hole-in-the-wall cafe or bubble tea place. So I'm very confident about this, but the very fact that you asked the question meant one of my goals was achieved. I wanted to get the discussion going, and I told staff, even just putting creeping thyme, I knew I missed a couple, but it changes the culture. It gets people talking. I've seen some facial responses. I'm probably going to be educated a lot more, and we can maybe develop this more of a comprehensive policy in the committee that you chair.
Thank you, Councillor Morales, and not to belabor it, but also staff have done a great job to also, as we talk about boulevards and other pieces, already providing resources on our website. So that could also be a nice current place to point people to around considering the landscaping. And then I guess, if I may, I'd like to redirect a question to staff. So on that piece and with the Blue Box, while it's tied to a current development in front of us, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Ms. Banfield, is there already a communication or something underway by which developments that are happening will be given a heads up about the Blue Box program, and or is there any communication that they'll be getting anyway, so we can kind of frame, there's not a missed opportunity between how they interpret their autonomy in choosing recycling programs versus what they might be asked to adhere to.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kunkel. I'm actually going to direct your question to Sandy Coulter, who oversees waste, but I can just also say with you, among other things, but I can also say that every development application is reviewed internally by our team, and comments are provided. Obviously, it's different depending on which application, but Mr. Coulter can fill in some of those blanks for you.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kunkel. With respect to the Blue Box Transition Program, it is transitioning in Barrie on May 1st, 2024, which will remove the municipality's responsibility to collect those recyclable materials from residential communities. So that information about the transition is still, the details are still unavailable at this time. We are communicating with Circular Materials right now on their plan, and we will update you as soon as we can when we get that information. But right now for Barrie, we just do not have that info.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter, and I appreciate that because I know I've had residents in an apartment setting where they've chosen their own type of recycling infrastructure and then had wanted to change their mind after occupancy, and condo boards have changed kind of the cost and trying to mitigate that, and some of them have been missed opportunities. And now with the Blue Box, depending on when that comes, I wasn't clear about different requirements that will come provincially based on the different structures. So will apartment buildings or other types of formed development be required in the building and site plan to conform to the provincial interest, or will they continue to have some autonomy?
So that's a tough one to answer definitively.
Okay.
What I can share with you with some certainty is that during transition, which is for Barrie is from May 1st, 2024 to January 1st, 2026, the level of service for recycling collection for residential would remain essentially unchanged. So we do have that little bit of a grace period. After January 1st, 2026, we anticipate that, you know, the Circular Materials will continue to offer a similar program, but we do not have that verification yet.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and I thought it was worth asking as we've got different developments coming in line at different times, if we can mitigate any type of cost incurrence if they've got to change their plan midway and it impacts the design of the building. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Corso, did I see your hand?
Just a comment through you to Councillor, wow, it's been a long time, to Sergio, Councillor Morales. I just wanted to comment that I was really happy to see the alternative lawn solutions there. I know that we cannot be too prescriptive when it comes to such things in development, but the suggestion is an absolutely good one, considering the water-intensive traditional lawns that we have. I'm very happy with that, and I'd like to see that encourage much more new developments in commercial spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. My only comment is that if creeping thyme and clover grass create allergies, and I have a conflict of interest today, we'll now call the vote. All those in favor of the amendment? It carries. On the main motion, any comments or questions? Councillor Negussi? You don't have a question. Councillor Morales?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Mayor Nuttall, I'm committed to reaching the city's targets and will do whatever I can so Barrie residents have access to housing options they can afford as quickly as possible. But if anything, I think the provincial target for the city of Barrie is quite conservative. We've been working very hard focusing on approving units, on ensuring they get through all of the various stages of the planning process and getting the permits out the door to be able to start building. Mayor Nuttall, if those words sound familiar, it's because they are. Those were words that you were quoted in the media word by word in the last couple of months as saying about the city of Barrie. And why I did kind of play on words is I am proud of your leadership in conveying council's housing pledge as the head of council to the public in Ontario as a whole. As we all know, our housing pledge is 23,000 units. As we all know, 17,000 units, give or take, have been approved, so that leaves 6,000 yet to be approved to hit our target. Tonight, we are approving between this application, and I'm not being presumptive of the City Council, but it's on the public printed agenda for 680 Yonge. Between the two of them, looking at the print designs, which are subject to change, there's about 777 units of housing to be approved. It's a lucky number, am I right, Mayor Nuttall? In the 6 months since we signed the housing pledge, if we were to assume that the housing pledge should be evenly distributed to each ward, which is not, I'm proud to be able to say that Ward 9 will have met its 6-unit share of the 6,000 pending in our housing pledge, and then exceeded that number by an extra 29.5%. While that may be the case, I agree with your comments that our target may be conservative, and I look forward to us leading Ontario and doing right by our Barrie residents and getting more housing approved. The housing crisis is an everything crisis. The ability to afford proper housing affects quality of life, livability, mental health, domestic violence, the economy, savings, everything. We need to be unapologetic about the more housing supply. And tonight's approvals in Ward 9 is getting us one significant step closer to where we need to be. I want to point out the evolution on this project, and I do want to make a couple of compliments. I usually let applications in Ward 9 go. I don't do a long speech. Miss Madeline Snow has been stellar on this application. So I do want to give huge comments to Ms. Snow. The whole process, the ability to uphold the process, but also have flexibility and vision into this is something that needs to be commended publicly. Ms. Banfield as well, with the way she kind of managed and oversaw this file, is huge. And for members of council, when you read the staff report, initially the proponent came with 9 stories. They finished at 11. There's a 23 net more units for Barrie residents for all our targets. And I want everybody to go to page 4 and section 19, because this just has to be read. I've never had this experience in Ward 9. Notification was sent to all interested parties, including those who provided information at the time of the neighborhood meeting and public meeting of the changes proposed by the applicant. And what I mean by that is the changes to go from 9 to 11 stories. One written submission, it was an 8-story submission that they started at. One written submission was received in support of the revised plans, specifically the increased side yard setback to the north. And that is huge, because it's my understanding that that submission was from the most affected resident who has a 3-year-old home physically right behind this proposal. What was being proposed was a 8-story building on Yonge and 4 stories with a 7-meter setback to his home and his pool. And now the setback went from 7 meters to 34 meters. So a lot more of a setback, a lot more privacy, not a blank wall over your newly built house and your pool, but with 11 stories. I haven't seen many applications, Mayor Nuttall, where residents in that situation actually take the time to write and say, I support 11 stories. Very, very pragmatic resident. He knows he used to live in Ward 9 elsewhere. He knows he bought there beside Yonge Street. He gets it. It's Yonge Street. It's a provincial highway. And that kind of community coming together where the established neighborhood is happy. We're getting more units. We're building the heights that we need to, which is why I held the other item about our application to the province near the GO station, as you said, getting it done where it needs to be done, and then also having the professionalism staff showed on this file is quite incredible. So, like I said, I don't usually make big speeches on Ward 9 applications because they're pretty straightforward, but I think staff definitely deserve the kudos on this one, as well as the applicants. And then one more thing, Mayor Nuttall. The applicants sent a letter to Ms. Banfield and CC'd me earlier today. They are committing to hitting their 10% affordable housing target, and I just want to make sure I say the number right before I say it. Logging onto my phone, there we go. And that number for hitting the affordable housing target is 25 units. As we all know from revisions, it's encouraged that you hit your number, but you don't have to hit your number. But again, the applicant has been very understanding of the reality, and they have sent an in-writing letter. And I know there's many more steps to how that will look and things for staff to go forward, but it's a good first step. So I will be voting as to no surprise, in favor of this application. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that I'm thankful that you conveyed your comments to the media the last couple of months, Mayor Nuttall, and I think this is one small example on how we're helping collectively as a group get to that target.
Thank you, Councilor Morales. Thanks for all your comments on the subject and your work on this file. I know you've put a lot of time and effort into it over the last number of months, so thank you. And also to the applicant with regards to the affordable housing. It's incredibly important, probably the most important piece of the entire affordability issue we're seeing. So thank you so much for coming to the table on that as well. If there's no other comments or questions, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And it carries. We'll now move on to DEV 041-23. Councilor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll be quick with this one. I said I held it for that reason. So this is Federal Housing Accelerator Fund application. Ms. Banfield, I noticed on page 4 that the chart that's part of section.
Sorry, Councilor Morales, is the motion on the floor?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll put the floor on the floor as printed. And now I have some comments. Through you to Ms. Banfield, section 16, but the table, not the paragraph, so it's at the top of page 4, says that close to transit, the baseline proportion units are being estimated to be 3%. I understand percentages are one thing, and it's about the number, but 3% seems a little bit low of a target to me initially, which is why I'm asking a question. Because my understanding is that close to transit, as per the definition, is essentially the GO stations. So we're talking about more or less the area I was talking about, maybe a little bit closer. Could you just maybe elaborate why the 3% is 3% and not higher, and then maybe if we overshoot our target, how that would look like in an application?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councilor Morales. So there is some judgment calls that staff have to make when they're applying for grants, and it's about being aspirational, but also a little bit realistic. And so in this case, we actually kept our close to transit target to be right within the MTSA, the major transit station area. We didn't expand that buffer. And if you actually look at the lands that are right in the major transit station area, a lot of them already have pre-approvals, already have some approvals, and there actually aren't too many of them that are purely residential. So that's where the 3% comes from. At the end of the day, if we are successful getting any sort of funding from the federal government on this, there is a recalibration. We have to, there's how much you get per unit. There are different opportunities for top-ups depending on the grant, and there's that recalibration where you report to the province every year about what units you have ultimately occupied, because it's about kind of turnkey successes. So there is that ability to, if it ends up being more, tomorrow staff, pending council's decision, are going to look at the application again and look at some of those numbers again, so we can take a look at that. But ultimately, staff did take a conservative approach as it relates to this close to transit definition.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Banfield. And Mayor Nuttall, thank you for that explanation, Ms. Banfield. Mayor Nuttall, I hope that we're going to be in a situation where that number goes up naturally, and I'll actually refer to a specific Ward 9 situation, which I believe you're aware of. When I was knocking on doors of residents in Ward 9 last summer, I couldn't believe it. There were residents in single-detached home with pools on Joseph, on Raymond, that would point to some of the towns that went up on Yonge Street and went, that should have been buildings. And I paused for a second, like, you would have preferred a 6-story building at a minimum across the street from me. You're like, yeah, if you're going to do it somewhere, that's where you do it. And some of them told me that they also told you the same thing. So it's kind of interesting that this is within that catchment area. So there's still lands that have yet to be developed. So hopefully that pushes up that number, and we can have even a more successful application.
Thank you, Councilor Morales. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Riepma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to point to paragraph number 24 of the report, and it suggests that the city could possibly get $43 million. And anytime we have a shot at winning a lottery like that, we need to take it.
Agreed. My comments, first of all, Councillor Morales, you know that I'm not in love with that development that you're talking about across the street on Yonge Street.
I tried to hide that sentiment.
I think the opportunity to provide some variation in built form there would be fantastic. But secondly, to Councillor Rittmer's point, like now's the time where the feds need to really step up and put the money where it needs to be. We've heard talk of, I think it was $4 billion initially. I think it's been expanded since then. And they've come to town a few times. We've met with them. We've showed them the options, the opportunities. I think the city of Barrie is uniquely positioned. We have wastewater and water. We have multiple accesses to multiple electrical grids. There's just a lot of infrastructure that's already there for us to be able to immediately take on and help fix some of the affordability issues we have locally here. But we need to have some support from other levels of government. We're going to be talking to the provincial government next week at AMO about just that. But this one specifically on the federal side, we need the feds to be able to come to the table and invest in a place that is invested in wastewater, that is invested in water, and all types of infrastructure to be able to immediately move. So I hope that happens. It'll take a partnership between the feds, the province, the city, the development community, the building community, and basically the community as a whole. So I look forward to seeing where this goes. All those in favor? And it is approved.
That's a separate report.
Separate report is being requested by Councilor Morales. The last one is in camera, which is the LCS 010-23. So we will go in camera, but before we do, I just want to make sure we take care of all of the rest of the business that we can. We'll leave inquiries and announcements to tonight's council meeting. Are there any comments regarding items on the circulation lists from June 29th? Councilor Riepma?
Item C4, and that is a request by the City of Woodstock of the province to permit speed cameras throughout the community as opposed to in very specific locations. I would like to refer that to the Community Safety Committee for a discussion about it and see whether we can support that.
All those in favor of referring to community safety, it's approved. Anything else from the 29th of June? July 6th? July 13th? July 20th? August 16th? Councilor Riepma?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number C7, and that's a letter from the town of Fort Erie about short-term rentals. And what I like about that letter is that they're looking to the province to create a structure within which we can, as municipalities, decide whether we want to regulate or not. And I know that in some wards, short-term rentals are a bit of an issue. And so I would like to refer that. I was thinking to the Affordability Committee, but I'm open to suggestions on that one. Yeah, I would refer it to affordability.
Madam Deputy Clerk, does that make sense, affordability?
Yes, I do believe it does.
Wonderful.
Okay.
So the referral motion's on the floor. All those, you ask a comment or voting? Question? Yeah, Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nettle. Ms. MacArthur, it's my understanding that anything to do with bylaw regulation goes to community safety, as per previously proposed landlord registries, increase in proactive bylaw enforcement and such. So I've already told this to Councilor Riepma, so I'm confused as to why that's the case.
Through to you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Morales. There are different criteria and whatnot for each of the reference committees. We can definitely go through all of them and make sure it's to the appropriate reference committee.
Perfect. Yeah, just whatever the policy is, and if we're doing this on the fly, then let's just keep it consistent. So, Mayor Nuttall, again, it's fresh coming back off the summer. This is a referral, which is debatable. Is that correct?
Madam Deputy Clerk, help me out here.
Referrals are not debatable.
Referrals are not debatable. Okay. So next time I'll do a point of order, because if the person referring it gets to explain it and there's other comments. So, okay.
So on the floor is a referral to the Community Safety Committee. All those in favor? That's approved. Any other items from August the 16th? We're running short on time here. I did want to quickly ask our CAO, or I guess maybe comment and ask our CAO with regards to the numbers that we've been receiving for occupancies and new housing starts. They continue to be very strong. Is the expectation overall that we're continuing to see a very busy planning department, and therefore we'll continue to see these numbers kind of climb, on the current with the current direction, or have we started to see it shy off a little bit?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Through you to members of General Committee. Well, I'm cautious with my crystal ball, Mayor Nuttall. I would tell you that the latest building report that members of council, I believe, received just a couple of days ago, as our dwelling unit start has already achieved last year's whole number. So as of July of this year, we achieved as many dwelling unit starts as we did in all of 2022, which is certainly significant. Under occupancies, we are already running at about 40% higher than we had in all of 2022. So while I'm a little hesitant to speculate forward, I'll tell you the numbers that have been reported to date continue to show robust work both in the planning, development services, building services, and of course in the development industry in Barrie.
Thank you, and I think it's important to note, we've heard Councillor Morales' comments. He also gave my comments, and we are a good partner. We are a good partner to the building and development community. We're a good partner to those who are looking to get into housing, and we've been a good partner to the province on following through on what the priorities that they've communicated are. And the proof is in the pudding. The numbers are continuing to come in. If we see some sort of pullback, I believe it'll be across the board in all of Ontario, or perhaps all of Canada, not just here. And I just want to say thank you for the work that our public servants continue to do. It's never perfect, but it is moving forward very quickly. And with the resources you have, I think it's being done very, very well. So thank you to our team here at City Hall that's actually making that happen. With that, we'll now move into, General Committee will move into closed session to discuss the staff report LCS 010-23 concerning confidential personal information matters. Can I get a motion, please, to move in camera? Moved by Councillor Kungl, seconded by Councillor Corser. We'll now convene in Sir Robert Barrie, I believe. We'll be convening in Sir Robert Barrie.